My name is Darden North. I am an author and a physician, still practicing full-time gynecology.
And when did you start writing?
I started writing my first book, Phil, probably sometime late 1990s. I sometimes say 1995. I don't think it was quite that far back, but it didn't come out till 2005. So I've been published since 2005.
What inspired you? Why did you decide to start writing?
Well, we doctors think we can do anything, and I started reading some of the Mississippi authors, contemporary authors at the time, and thought, some of them were lawyers, some of them were musicians and other things, and I think I can do this too. So I got interested. I had a little more time. My kids were older, didn't have as much homework to do at night, so I decided to start writing, and I haven't stopped.
And you have how many books out?
I have 6 published novels. I have a 7th novel written called The Friendly Enemy that isn't published yet, and I'll be pitching it to agents and at the International Thriller Writers Conference this May in New York. I went to that conference about probably 8 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago. It's a really good opportunity to meet with other authors and writers, as well as to do live pitches to agents who are looking for new talent. Of course, if I don't consider myself new talent, but to some people I am. Some people don't know anything about my books, but the bigger the audience, the more people know, and I think the better it is.
So your plots are, a lot of them are mysteries, and they're all medically oriented, is that right?
The Friendly Enemy that I just mentioned that hasn't come out yet is the only novel I have that's not about medical characters at all. And when I say medical characters, the theme may have some medicine in it, but the books are not necessarily about medicine. The characters are generally doctors or nurses. There's usually a murder involved, whereas you may have some people writing about legal situations or lawyers. I have doctors. The Friendly Enemy is based on a true story and a real detective's career back in the late 70s and early 80s. So it was an entirely different avenue for me to write.
When do you do your writing?
If I were smart, I would go to bed about 9:30 and get up about 5 and write for 30 minutes every day. But I generally get up at 5:30 anyway to go to work because I still practice gynecology full time, do office and do surgery. So, I do think it's easier to write earlier in the morning. But that being said, I'll usually write some at night when I get home or on the weekends. I do not write between seeing patients, and when they're waiting for me in the waiting room is not because I'm back there writing a book. That is not what happens. The Fresh Frozen, again, was my third novel. It's about frozen embryos, and I was at a medical conference, and that was sort of new technology in 2008 when that book was written about freezing frozen embryos. It's pretty commonplace now. So I worked that into a situation where an evil person was trying to steal the movie star's frozen embryos.
So what do you do about editing, revising, proofreading?
I have participated in the Pitch to Publish Writers Group. It's really an international online group that I got involved with probably a little bit over a year ago, and have had some beta readers through that. I have used Janet Taylor Perry, who's an excellent editor here in the Jackson area. I've had her edit the last couple of books as well, and I've discovered something that everybody tells you should do, and I hope you do this too, Phil, when you write, is actually read the book out loud. And actually I'll pretend I'm the character sometimes as though I'm narrating the book, and I think that lets me hear it, lets me do a lot of editing that way too. Now with the spell check and things like that we have available to us, a lot of that spelling gets corrected. So most of it is, content and pacing that you want somebody else to hear. And anyway, that's my process. And of course, my publisher, WordCast Press, always does a very good edit of the book too, and that helps a lot.
Tell us about your marketing.
I have a website. It is dardennorth.com, and I keep that as current as I can. I have all 6 of my novels listed there as far as purchasing links and a little bit about this very, very short synopsis about the book. I have some videos of some of my other interviews on there.
First of all, my newest novel, The 5 Manners of Death, has been out in audio for about a month, narrated by Stephen J. Cohen. It can be downloaded from audible.com, Amazon, and iTunes. And I think you'll really like listening to it even if you've already read the book.
So that's been very helpful to have a website. I also have a Facebook. I market through Facebook, and I have an author Facebook. So I have a social Facebook and author Facebook. I've just gotten involved with TikTok to think through that a long time before I did that, but that's been kind of fun. And then I also do Instagram, and what else is there? I'm also on Twitter too, and it made me remember my handle is easy. It's Darden North on all of them. And actually, I've got a YouTube channel too. I meant to mention that too. I haven't done any interviews like you do, but I have my book trailers posted on YouTube, all 6 of them, which are like movie trailers, but they're about books.
It all starts with one simple desire. The lines between life and death, good and evil, become blurred.
Basically do a lot of social media marketing.
And that's been successful for you.
Yes, it has been. When I first started out, which was in 2005 when the first book came out, did a lot of print advertising. I would have ads in magazines and newspapers and things like that, and that was certainly expensive, and I think it was worth a lot. But I do think social media is very, very important. I think it's good for anyone to find out a little bit about the writer, about who he or she is, and I think that lets them understand their writing some more, and plus I can communicate with my fans and hear from them that way. Social media, I think it's great.
Do any marketing like going out doing lectures or book signing?
I do. In fact, I'm going to be speaking at the Good Neighbor Club here in Jackson in March. I love to go to book clubs. I have done some FaceTime or Zoom book clubs. I've actually gone physically to book clubs, signed books. I really enjoy doing that. I've done, used to do the Mistletoe Marketplace show a lot, where we would sell and sign books, and did handworks here in Jackson this past Christmas. So tried to be out and about as much as I can as far as hand selling the books and meeting new readers. And I've been doing this, like I said, since 2005, and it's amazing how many people don't know. We just did the audiobook for Wiggle Room, which is actually my 4th novel. The audiobooks did not come out in order, but I have 5 of the 6 in Audible. They're on audible.com as well as Amazon and iTunes.
Do you write anything else besides novels?
I do not write anything besides novels. I was asked to write a 1-page story for a magazine, but I write a lot in medical charts all day long. And the medical charts don't correct your spelling as much as the software does on the laptop when you're writing a book too. But no, I haven't really ventured. I have been involved in editing the screenplay for Wiggle Room, which is planned to be produced into a 90-minute film, which will be released to the streaming services. And that is something I wanted to mention to you. So, I did not write the screenplay, but I did have the opportunity to help work in editing it. And that has shown me that writing dialogue for a screenplay is much different from a book. Thad Turner, who's the producer of the movie and also the screenplay writer, did try to take some of the dialogue out of the book and remain true to the story. But I can see that it needs to be a little bit different when it's a screenplay. And I think that maybe eventually I would like to try to write a screenplay from scratch, and I think I could do it. I do have the software to do it, but it'll take some time. Well, the screenplay of Wiggle Room has been completed. It's still in draft form, but because I understand the way that works is that screenplays do evolve as the filming starts, and of course it will be filmed in Mississippi. We are very fortunate to have the Mississippi Film Office here, which is involved in promoting filming in Mississippi, whether it be a movie or a television show or something for streaming services, with the film rebates that the Mississippi legislature has provided. And we hope that will continue and in fact be expanded, because we have more and more and more people coming here wanting to film here in Mississippi. And some of these stories that are being filmed here are not necessarily set in the South. It's just that the conditions to film here are so good as far as the weather. We have so many good months of good weather here. But we do want to try to get those projects that are based in Mississippi, that are particularly written by Mississippi authors, to be filmed here. And I think it's so wonderful because there's such a big community of people who want to be involved in movies as far as being in them, and there's so much talent here. So I had the opportunity through networking to meet Thad Turner of Talmark Media, who's an independent filmmaker. He's actually from Louisiana, but of course our movies will be filmed here in Mississippi. And he's done other projects, and is very, very good about organizing and keeping things true to budget, because it is so much more economical now to film these days with all our digital media availability, that you can produce a very high quality film for a lot less money, and that makes it more economical to film these days.
What is your budget for a film?
Our budget for Wiggle Room is between $750,000 to $1 million, which is a low budget film. That's a lot of money, but it's still considered a low budget film. A regular budget film would be $18 to $20 million or higher.
Wow.
So we've obviously been looking for investors, and there are people that do want to promote the arts in Mississippi, and it is an industry. And it does help the state because it employs people through filming, and I think presents our state in a good image too, when we can do anything with the arts. We anticipate the budgets for the movies will increase as we go along, and hopefully we won't stop with just 3. The plan is to have the 3 90-minute films that will be marketed to the streaming services initially. You don't have to depend on theaters now, obviously, and people buying tickets. You've got just a wealth of people that want to watch things on television. That's not being said. We certainly wouldn't be happy to have our products shown in theaters, and that may happen. But there's a great need for high quality productions to satisfy the streaming service channels, and so that's what makes these projects a lot more feasible these days to do than perhaps say 10 years ago.
What advice would you have for writers, both those starting off and those who've been writing for a while?
My advice to any person who wants to write is, well, do it, and don't throw anything away. Back when I started writing, I didn't trust the computer. This was, the late 1990s, and I would print everything I wrote, so I had stacks of paper everywhere. And then my 7th grade daughter, I think, showed me how you could cut and paste on the computer and that kind of thing. So anyway, there's been a big learning curve there. So that being said, there's no reason, you can't sit down and write. And I type. I've taught myself to type through this process. And I don't write longhand, don't really have the patience to do that. But, if that's the way you want to write, start writing, and, just write your thoughts. And you may have enough thoughts one day to put them together into a book. A lot of people start with a short story or become a short story writer, and I think that's a great way to do it. I didn't do it that way, but, that's a good option. I think everybody does have a book in them. and you just have to do it. There is a science to it. I clipped out of English composition as a freshman at Ole Miss, so I never had to take that, which I was glad for, but it's perhaps I would have learned a little bit then. But practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect, but I'm working that way, trying to be as good as I can.
Where do you get your ideas for your books?
My ideas come from just a lot of sources. I got the idea for The 5 Manners of Death, which is my 5th novel, and will be the 2nd in the series of 3 movies that we plan, beginning with Wiggle Room, The 5 Manners of Death, and the Work in Progress Rooftop, which has not been written yet, but is in progress. I got the idea from The 5 Manners of Death at another writing conference, where fellow author who's also a physician was talking about the 5 manners of death and the way they label death as far as the police go, which is suicide, homicide, undetermined, natural, and accidental. And I had never thought about that or really knew that. And there's a difference between those things as far as whether someone is accused of truly, whether it's manslaughter or whether it's an intentional murder and that kind of thing. So I thought I'm going to work that into a novel somehow. So I created a situation where Dinah Bratton, who has become the protagonist in those series of 3 movies that I just mentioned, she's a female surgeon who's introduced in Wiggle Room, and then she becomes more important throughout that book, and then is really the main character in The 5 Manners of Death. And she begins to see people dying in those 5 ways, and she sees that her aunt, who is really her aunt by marriage actually, is really her only living relative other than her small daughter, has written those 5 ways to die down on a piece of paper. And so she becomes curious about that, and then she begins to see these deaths show up that way, and that sort of sets the novel into play. And so the ideas just come, they come from different places. And I may be talking to someone at a party and hear something. My most current novel, which is Party Favors, that is set on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, is about the opioid crisis. And of course that's very important in the news, unfortunately, these days. And I work that into a novel and a thriller. So,
how do you develop your characters? Do you do like outlines on all the characters?
Character development obviously is very, very important. I do think in commercial fiction, which is what I write, plot is really extremely important, but characters do drive the novel. I wish I were that organized that I outlined all the characters. I think my characters, sort of develop. I think it's important to let the reader have his or her own visualization of what the character looks like. I don't think it's that important to say, well, in walks a 5'10", great-looking guy with dark hair and perfect teeth. I don't think that's the way we should present those characters. I think we should describe them in the way they talk, in the situations they're in. If it's important to say they're very tall because it's important for the plot, then that's fine. So I think the physical appearance is not so important, but I think in the dialogue is how you really bring out who that character is, what he or she thinks, how they are, how they act, what other people think about them. And so dialogue the dialogue of those characters is really what drives the book and drives the plot. So I think I really pay more and more attention to the dialogue now. I want my characters to be new and fresh and different, and I do think they are in my books. And I want to get them in a lot of trouble. I want to put them in a lot of conflict, because conflict drives a book. Every page needs to introduce some new conflict or turmoil for that poor character and the people around them. And if you if you notice when you watch television now, and I do find time to watch a good bit, do binge a lot of shows, those characters are in constant turmoil, and that's what makes you tune in for the episode next week or tomorrow, whenever you're going to binge. I write now where each chapter is, I almost envision it as an episode of a TV series.
You generally start off feeling from the beginning that you know how the whole plot is going to go, or it's a lot of changes in your plot as you write?
There are a lot of changes. Some people ask, are you a pantser? And that's P-A-N-T-S-E-R, like, do you write by the seat of your pants? Or are you an outliner? And I think I've tried to start outlining a little bit more, and at least kind of writing a very tiny synopsis that gets me started. But I really do think there's a lot of changes as I go along. I'll have, like Rooftop, the current novel, I know the gist of what is going to happen to set that in play, and there'll be a murder. You have to have a murder in most murder mystery type books, and the murders are getting ready to happen. But as far as what happens after that, I'm not exactly sure. The protagonist, Diana Bratton, who is a general surgeon, she's a very busy single mother, overworked, having to deal with her busy practice and her daughter growing up with and she's not there all the time. She can't be there to go to every soccer practice, and she misses a lot of activities her daughter does because she's so busy. That's part of the conflict she has with her life, but she also wants to be a very busy surgeon. But she's becoming a sort of a detective in this series of books, and so she will come into play into trying to figure out what happened to one of her female partner's husband.
Do the books need to be read in a certain order?
No, I even though I say these 3 books, Wiggle Room, The 5 Manners of Death, and Rooftop, are a trilogy, that means that they're all standalone novels. They just have characters that are the same characters reappear, with other characters brought into each book. So they're not a series. There's a difference between a trilogy and a series. So I do have 6 books. I hope everyone will read every one of them, but you do not have to read them in order. And I will have some people say, well, I want to start with your first book, and I'll say, well, good, I want you to. And I'll tell them, I think you'll see my writing has changed through the years. I think it's faster. I think things happen quicker in the books. Although I'll have people say, well, I think your first book was my favorite, but or they'll say your last book was your best. So it's just hard to say. But again, to answer your question, you do not have to read them in order, or you don't have to listen to them in order, because they're on audiobooks too. You've covered it. You've done a really good job.
This is Dr. Philip Levin. Please like my videos and please subscribe to my YouTube channel.